Last hearing that we have for this evening, the Codes Department, we have Mr. Terry Cobbs and guest. I'll let him introduce his guest, but before you start your introductions and presentation, Mr. Cobb, are you satisfied with the mayor's proposal for your department?
Yes, we're satisfied.
All right, go right ahead with your presentation.
I'm Terry Cobb, the Director of the Department of Codes and Building Safety, and with me tonight is Wade Hill, who is currently in an acting director capacity at the department, as I've been on assignment down in the mayor's office for the past year. And to my right is Roy Jones, who's assistant director of the department over finance and administration. And in the audience, Bill Herbert, the Metropolitan Zoning Administrator, is with us tonight. And Bill Penn was with us, assistant director over property standards. But Bill has a role in the his church's service tonight, and he's first up at 7 o'clock, and he had to make his way to church, and he just left us. I had a few comments I'd like to make. The first is to thank the Codes Department staff for another great year. They do great work every day. This department has been extremely busy for the past year. In calendar year 2012, we issued 11,051 building permits for construction projects valued at $1.6 billion, making it the fourth biggest year in the history of the Metro government. From that, I think you can see that our economy is doing very, very nicely. One other thing that I think is significant about the $1.62 billion in construction permits and the fourth biggest year we ever had, not 1 cent of the $1.62 billion was from the construction of the Music City Center. That was actually accomplished over the past 2 years, and none of it was included in the 2012 numbers. The other thing about the $1.62 billion in building construction is that's just 10% shy of our all-time record production in 2006, which was $1.8 billion in building construction. So based on this economic indicator, I think it's safe to say that construction activity in Nashville is high. It's near an all-time high, and the revenues from permit fees are also near an all-time high. We are projecting this year's revenues from permit fees, from user fees, to exceed $11 million. That's almost $2 million better than this year's budget projections. And we expect next calendar year to also be a strong year. This is my 24th budget presentation. I'm pleased to report that for the 24th consecutive year, we have acted as good stewards of the resources entrusted to us, and we will complete the fiscal year operating well under our allocated budget. The Codes Department is proud of a 48-year history. The Codes Department is not quite 50 years old yet, but we're proud of our 48-year history of operating within our budget. You can count on us to continue to perform that way this next year and in future years. One thing I would like to share with the council, with the committee, is one of our principal goals, financial goals, is that our department fully recovers its operating costs from the user fees we charge for our services, our permit fees, our inspection fees, our plan review fees, so that the entire cost of operating the Codes Department, the direct expense and the indirect expense, our share of the Human Resources Department, our share of the Legal Department, our share of the Finance Department, all these costs are fully recovered through user fees in such a way that it's our customers, who are the contractors and developers and business owners, that are paying the user fees, and homeowners, building owners, and not from property taxes and not from sales taxes. Before you, the budget calls for a reduction of $152,000 in our budget. that actually represents a little bit more than 2% in reduction for the codes department, but it's done in a way that will have little, if any, impact upon the operations of the codes department. And in fact, it includes adding one position within the department. So there have been some cuts in demolition funds, and there have been some cuts in internal service fees. Then there's been an addition for one position, which is a plans examiner position to our budget. The net effect is $152,000 reduction. The one position that we've asked for that is before you, the total price tag with salaries and fringes and indirect expenses is about $74,000. It's for a plans examiner. The most time-consuming part of the permit process is the plans examination phase. And we're working to reduce our turnaround on plan review down to a 15-day turnaround. We're approaching it now. We consider that to be our best practices benchmark. And with the addition of this one position, we are confident we can achieve that. Our goal in permit processing is to become the most efficient permit process in the southeastern United States. I believe that we're among those today, but we want to be the most efficient. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb. Councilman Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Cobb. I see the reduction in the demolition, and you referenced that $180,000. Do we just not need as much demolition now as we have in years past?
We have been, for example, this year, I think our total expenditures in demolition was about $450,000, which included a $200,000 special appropriation. The council remember for the demolition of the old Memorial Bible Company on 24th Avenue North. That was an unusual occurrence to have one that large. We normally tear down somewhere between 20 and 25 houses a year. That's pretty customary. We've torn down 28 this year, plus the Bible Company building. We actually increased our level of funding for demolition significantly in, I think it was around 2007, 2008. We added $200,000 a year to it. The primary reason for that was because of the economic recession we were facing. When we go into economic recession, particularly one as significant as we've been through, housing vacancies, housing foreclosures, all these things start rising, and we have a need for more demolition money. As the economy begins to improve, we have less of a need. And so this would take it back to our normal demolition budget.
Okay, thank you very much. I had one other question. I think it was on Tuesday, the Election Commission was here, and we heard from them, I believe, that they've been asked to vacate their space and that you all would be moving into their space. Is that reflected somewhere here in the budget? Have you all budgeted for that move? Because as I understood it, the Election Commission had not.
Well, the budget item for the development of a permit center, a one-stop shop for development and building permits, is actually before you in the capital budget. It's not operating budget, it's capital budget. The permit center is an effort that has been discussed between the planning department and the codes department and the water department and public works department, finance department, the mayor's office, the economic development office, over several months now. The thinking is that efficient, effective permitting and development and building permits is an economic development tool. It's the type of tool that can set us apart from the neighboring cities or from the major metropolitan areas that we compete with for new business and industry. We have talked about developing a one-stop shop for permits for 4 decades. The finance department and the mayor's office and the other departments involved in the process think it's a worthy ideal that we should attempt to achieve. And that means first gathering all those agencies. If somebody comes to request a permit, it's not uncommon for them to go to the first, second, and third floor of the Metro office building, to go to the Public Works Department on South 5th Street, to go to the Water Department on 2nd Avenue North, to go to the Lentz Public Health Center over by Centennial Park, to go to the Historic Commission in the Sunnyside Mansion in Sylvan Park, and maybe visit all of these different locations multiple times. While we can issue more than half of the building permits we issue within 24 hours, most of them in one stop at the department. There is a percentage, and usually it's the larger, more complex projects, have to go round and round the city to all visiting the various departments. So if we could reload the Howard office building, and we looked at about 15 different cities that have developed one-stop shops. And there was a very common thread. You bring all the agencies into one building where the decisions, where the plans can be reviewed and the projects processed. You bring all those players into one building, and you sort of break down the walls between the various departments. Codes employees would be sitting next to planning employees, next to historic employees, next to water employees, and you provide, instead of a codes department having a permit shop on the 3rd floor, and planning has a permit office on the 2nd floor, and the water department on the 1st floor, and the Historic Commission in Sunnyside Mansion, Metro has one permit center. And that's what we're proposing to do with this capital budget. It entails using the 1st floor of the Howard building and would entail relocating the election commission, not early voting. Early voting still take place on the campus, as it always does. But that was part of the planning in trying to reload the Howard office building.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Harmon. Councilman Stein.
Thank you. Councilman Harmon got to that, and clearly the bottom line, though, is to move the election commission is far less expensive than it is to move everything else that has to do with this development would be out of the center. We'd essentially be emptying the building out, correct, and moving it to get this done.
And excuse me, I've been saying Howard office building. It's the Metro office building.
In the Fulton complex.
On the Fulton complex. Thanks, Wade. One other thing that is particularly unique as far as timing is concerned is there are no elections in 2013. So this may be the only year this decade where this is even possible. But the actual early voting and the voting locations and all that stuff would still remain on campus.
Okay. The beer board that was here earlier, obviously now they're, I guess the right term would be housed in the codes department, correct?
That's correct. We're side by side.
Right. And from your perspective, as you are working hand in hand with them to augment and update and improve and move forward their operations, is that going well from your perspective?
Yes. I think the space itself is better than the space they were in. We have scanned and indexed all of their records electronically. That's been accomplished. They are accepting credit card transactions. They've become, this is just as a neighbor. Mm-hmm. It appears to me they've become much more efficient and using technology to a greater extent. And then they still are moving forward with that.
And down the road, in terms of the efficiency and savings of their operation, is there an interaction between their, I mean, they have what, one inspector or two, I mean, over time, is there a way to integrate them with anything else you're doing to improve their reach in a more efficient way?
Well, I think, but let me just say, they're a very small department, and the nature of very small departments is, and I think I've heard them say in budget hearings, they had trouble even going to lunch, or if someone was out sick, covering. So as a larger department, not one of the largest metro departments, but as a department certainly a lot larger than the beer board is as a department, we're able to provide them some support. We can catch their phones, or we can handle some of their customers as they come through. Jackie and I have talked about, she asked if it would be possible to maybe cross-train some of our inspectors to assist them with an inspection workload. And so we're interacting and having those conversations.
Good. Well, it seems to be a win-win for everybody. And the last issue I want to bring up is, and Terry, it goes back to where you and I bonded about 15 or 16 years ago over trees and an urban forester and the tree ordinance. As we move, and there was just a massive meeting that involved your department and all the folks involved in it to talk about how we're working on that and what we need to do moving forward. It occurs to me that as we move to this one-stop shop, that there is a limited staffing to the urban forester. He may be it. I don't know how much else there is to it, but to make all of that efficient, and clearly it's not going to be in this budget, and I'm not asking for it to be, but it seems to me that between now and next year, we ought to take a look at whether or not there should be additional support, because my sense is that at least at the end, I guess the tree urban forester comes in at the end of the process almost always, that perhaps if it's not staffed as development increases in town, that not only may it not be as efficient as it might be, but also it may be just difficult for that to be done in your department with just limited personnel.
Well, it's certainly, but first of all, the tree ordinance has been very successful in Nashville. I think if you look at the projects that are done in our city today compared to those that were done prior to the tree ordinance, the difference is very dramatic. And Nashville is a better city as a result of it. Urban forestry, in terms of just enforcement of that portion of the zoning code, as I look at it, we had an urban forester in-house that was reviewing plans and available to serve customers, and we had an urban forestry inspector that spent full time out in the field. And through budget cutbacks over the years, we're down to one urban forester. And I remember the first time, I think Dave Cooley called me and said, "What do you think about putting the urban forester in the codes department?" My response, and next time you see Dave, ask him, my response was, "Great, let me have two of them." Because one person can't ever fully do that job at the level they need to do it at. But the truth is, the number of inspections that the urban forester does, historically, even when there were two urban foresters in the office, has never risen to the level to justify ever adding any more than that. What justifies adding someone is you want somebody available in your permit center to deal with customers while someone else is out in the field making the inspection.
And I would just ask you in the course of the next year to do an analysis of that, because we also ask him to do other things. I mean, there's an education component to it that is a little broader than that just, I would think, just wear on one's day, which might be some other reasons to justify that. And I would just say in conclusion, I would have never dreamed back 15, 16 years ago that I would ever be sitting in the room where you would say that the tree ordinance has worked, and I'm delighted it has.
Well, you were the champion of the tree ordinance, and you and Mayor Bredesen, and it was a great idea.
Thank you, Councilman Stein. Councilor Moore.
Thank you, Chair, and always good to see you, Mr. Cobb.
Good to see you.
Before I ask my question, Chairperson, Chair, could we look at, I know that Councilman Stein just mentioned about, one-stop shop, and is the Election Commission, since there is going to be a satellite, not satellite, but a, what did we just call it? early voting site, will they maintain some office space there? Because that means that if they are not maintaining office space there, then they're going to be moved way out somewhere where we have to go. Can you investigate that and see where they're going to be moved to?
That's an administrative function that anyone
Okay.
could investigate with the mayor's office.
Okay, so I need to ask the mayor instead of you?
Yes,
Okay. Would this still come under budget, wouldn't it? Because they still have to move them somewhere. It has to be a cost somewhere for the move.
But it's an administrative function that they're ordering.
Good answer. I like that. Well, then my second question would be too, so would the historical commission would be still under that administrative function as well that I need to ask?
The Historical Commission?
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's a conversation to have with Mr. Ebling. And-
Okay, and I'll have that with Mr. Reedman as well. I won't put him on the spot right now. Now my question to you, Mr. Cobb. How many demolition projects are there currently? Since I saw that on page G4. It talked about demolition projects. How many are there currently?
In terms of, in the pipeline,
Yes.
do you have that number? I know that we're pretty current, and when I say that, and let me say that I think back to when I joined the codes department in 1990. We had a backlog of 200 demolition projects on a waiting list and no money to tear them down.
Okay.
And then we had another 200 that were vacated and boarded up that there was no money to do anything with. Today, here's a rundown. We have, in various stages of the process, we have 164 properties where demolition is recommended. That meaning we begin the process to order it to be demolished. This was through March 25th, so
Okay.
numbers have changed a little bit. At that point in time, we'd actually demolished 19 plus the big Bible company on 24th. There were 66 actual projects pending. There were 55 had been demolished by the owners when we ordered them to demolish them. And 24 had been downgraded to repair through the appeal process. So the numbers, the absolute maximum number would be 66 on that date, a number of which would be actually demolished by the owner instead of Metro, or might be downgraded to a repair should someone step forward to accept responsibility and repair the property and restore it back to be code compliant. I don't know if that fully answers, but we'll be glad to follow it up and give you something more specific.
The question was, how much is it per demolition? Is that, do you have that broken down as well?
I'm just going to give you a ballpark figure. It's about, if we're talking about demolishing a house, it's about $7,000 per house. There's some
And you multiply
administrative
that by
costs and such,
166?
but we
Are
have,
those- is that
we have
houses or
demolished
businesses?
28
Okay.
this year, plus the Bible company. And we have, I think, $28,000 remaining between now and the end of the year.
Okay.
And we've got, I think, one project out for bid today. Recently, another reason that demolition was maintained at a higher level was following the 2010 flood. There have been some flood damaged properties that have needed some demolition monies. And recently, even Metro Water has stepped in with some federal funds that were available to them to supplement our efforts.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I guess we have to look at that, what you are requesting as well. That's going to take us some very serious consideration, since you said you only had 28,000 left. So that is something to look at.
But we've spent, that's 28,000 left out of 455,000 this year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We're still asking for 200,000 in next year's budget.
Well, how much
Which is a pretty
is,
normal year-to-year amount of money for demolition.
Okay, so how much is left to demolish, I mean, for these projects? So currently, how much is left?
In this fiscal year,
Yeah.
between now and the end of June, 28,000.
Oh, 28,000.
But
Okay.
with the budget that's before you, there would be an additional 200,000 available on July 1st.
Okay, okay. Okay, we're just trying to get our head wrapped around those numbers, that's all.
200,000.
Okay. My second question is on page G2. You talked about in one of the strategic issues that there's a growing technology gap that exists between the departments and its customers, resulting in longer response times and the inability to communicate with the latest technology and incomplete information to our customers. How are you working with, Keith Durbin just left here, and how are you working with that department to sort of, maybe make those kind of changes there?
That strategic issue was stated, what year?
What year?
2003. And it's still on our budget book. Actually, we're working with Keith Durbin and the IT department extremely well. They worked with us to install a system called Kiva in response to that. And today it is among the elite computer and technology systems in existence in the United States. Kiva, however, was purchased in 2003, and as technology evolves, in last year's budget, the council approved an upgrade of the entire system, and an RFP has been released in the last 2 weeks to completely replace that system and keep us in the elite category.
Okay, because I know that when I've been online that it is sometimes very hard to navigate, and I was just wondering how, when I looked at the strategic issues, I was just like, okay, has that been updated or been addressed,
One of the ways we've been able to reduce staffing over the number of years is that because of our technology, wait, I don't know if I have this percentage immediately available. But I would estimate that we issue 60 to 70% of the permits that are issued over the internet. Our customer actually applies for the permit, processes their own permit application, pays for it with a credit card, and issues it to themselves online. The first year we installed that program, we reduced the number of phone calls in the codes department by 40,000 calls. So our system is pretty sophisticated.
Okay. One last question. You made in your statement that construction activity is high. Is that a lot of residential? Is that a lot of businesses? And then I'm going to lead into this other part. If construction is high, and these individuals submit some type of plan, how is parking addressed?
Parking is addressed 2 ways, actually. One is it's part of our zoning review. The first step in the permit process is to look at a property's zoning, determine and review a site plan, determine how many parking spaces are required versus how many they're providing. But it is, today, construction is high. It includes a lot of commercial. It includes a lot of residential, but it's multifamily residential primarily. Although single-family residential construction is growing, 30% a year, it's still less than a third of what it used to be. The residential emphasis tends to be more apartments, condominiums, townhouses, more dense developments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Moore. Also, to your first question, to me, the capital improvements budget will be in committee the first meeting in June. So you'll get to address some of those then. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Matthews. Mr. Cobb, thank you all for being here and for the tremendous amount of work that your department does. I work with you on a regular basis, and I appreciate what the volume and what you handle each day. My question is about the addition to the budget. You're asking for an additional zoning examiner, but my question is, why was it not considered to add an additional property standards inspector? Because a lot of response time is delayed because of not being able to address a lot of the codes issues in our neighborhoods.
Couple of things. One is it's the position we requested, and it is included in the budget before you, is for a plans examiner, not a zoning examiner. This is for someone to look for compliance with the building codes, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, energy codes, accessibility code, a stack of code books versus those plans. The zoning component is.
And right now you've got what, 2?
Right now I have 4 plans examiners.
Okay,
adding
and
one
3
increases-
property standards inspectors?
In property standards, we have 14 or 15 property standards inspectors currently,
Okay, I'm looking at the wrong
and 3
sheet.
chiefs who also do some work in the field, plus a support staff of 4. And we currently have 2 vacancies that this budget would allow us to fill. Both of those vacancies as a result of the buyout incentive. So later in the year, we will be filling both of those positions, or that would be our proposal. I didn't, when we submitted our budget, we were asked to show a 2% budget cut. Our 2% budget cut included losing 2 property standards inspectors. The budget before you, the mayor's recommended budget, did not include those cuts. In other words, they're fully funding the property standards unit.
Okay, good. The other question around the property standards unit is the time that a codes issue has to go through the environmental court and that whole process. For instance, I have cases very familiar to Mr. Penn on Mesa Drive over in the Nashville Village area that's been going on since August of 2012. And I followed up constantly every month, almost every other month. I'm sending emails. And the last response I received, the response was that a court date had been set for April 17th. And then when I followed up after April 17th, I was told, well, the court date is May 29th. Now, I'm going to try to be there because I don't understand what is going on. And when I sent an email to say, well, what happened to the April 17th court date, I was given no information. It was just, it's been changed to May 29th. Why is the process so long, and what can we do to shorten that?
Well, the process and the number of days allowed under due process of law is about as short as it legally can be. I don't know specifically about that case, but I'm sure if Bill Penn were here, he could discuss it with you. But the Constitution requires that if we're going to prosecute a violation, we've got to go through certain due process of law, meaning we need to give notice, tell them what the violation is, give them an opportunity to correct the violation, allow them a reasonable period of time to make the correction, and then we can issue a warrant. And then our warrants are served by the sheriff's department, and you actually have to serve the defendant in order for them to come to court. And sometimes the sheriff's office, warrants division, is unable to get service of process. Or once it goes to court, now we're in the judicial branch of the government, and there are dilatory tactics that defendants and their attorneys can use to delay the court proceeding.
Okay. So it's not unusual for property standards issues to take a year or longer to get resolved, is what you're saying? Okay.
I would say that's pretty rare.
Okay.
we made something on the order of 39,000 property standards inspections last year. So we process a lot of cases, and we issue a notice, order it to be corrected, give them a reasonable period of time to make the correction, and a large amount of the time, the correction gets made just like we asked for it to. Now, those that don't, then we've got to go the extra mile of issuing the warrant, getting the notice, getting it in court. The attorney for the defendant is always going to ask that it be continued the first time it comes up. It may be twice. The judge may grant it. Okay? So once you get into the court process, I wish it moved quicker, but it doesn't.
Well, also, I'm going to ask Ricky Rooker this question as well, because I was talking with the General Sessions people yesterday about having some type of tool online where I or a constituent can go and look and see if a case has gotten to the court level, and you can click on that and know when the court date and just a little brief information about it. Right now, it's so hard to get that information. You have to be vigilant and continually a person that follows up constantly to get the information. So I think if you all could collaborate and figure out a tool that maybe could be easily accessible, so that, people won't be blowing up my email all the time, and they have somewhere where they can go, and they're not waiting on their council person to get an answer from codes and that type of thing. So just please consider that. The other thing is going to the Election Commission issue. Were there any other sites within the vicinity considered outside of the Election Commission spot?
Well, it needed to, actually, you've got to understand, 80% of the departments that need to be there are there.
I understand that.
Okay.
But
so do you move a one half of one floor, or do you vacate the entire building?
well, but you're creating another thing, a one-stop shop where, you know, people who are trying to get those permits go to one area. What I'm saying is, were there other locations within a certain, like a mile or two radius within there, within that area that may be metro buildings or somewhere where you could point them to that one-stop shop versus having to relocate the election commission that people are very, very familiar with in terms of location?
And the short answer is yes.
So you did explore other locations?
There were other areas discussed.
Can you share that with the council? I would like to know what those locations were.
The only one I specifically recall was Metro Southeast, of taking all of the departments and moving all of them out there. I know that came up.
I'm specifically asking about just the one-stop shop because that's the new thing that you're trying to.
When you talk about that, you're talking about the entire, or at least half of the codes department, most of the planning department, all of the water services permit office, the stormwater management office, the cross connection office of the water department, the grease control office from the water department, the historic commission, the fire marshal's office, you know, and you're talking about 8, I think, different departments relocating, or some.
Well, not departments, just those the permit divisions of those departments going into one area.
Yeah, it would be like relocating 40% of the codes department, probably 60% of the planning department, 20% of the water department.
I just still want to know if other options have been explored and what can be explored. I understand the dynamics of what you're saying. Being in human resources, I understand when you do shifts in different departments to try to consolidate and combine services. I understand that. But there could be some other alternatives that can work without relocating a department that the public is so used to, you know, they're used to having access to that election commission at that site. And it's going to take a lot to educate and get people to change their behavior patterns in terms of accessing the election commission. So, I just want to know what else has been considered and why ultimately that is the best choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilman Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Terry, going back to the question that Council Lady Moore asked, the statement under strategic issues dealing with technology gap, longer response times, inability to communicate, you're saying that shouldn't be in the book. Is that right?
I'm saying that was developed under Results Matter and on or around 2003, something like that. That was a compelling strategic issue for us at that time.
But it's not anymore.
And it was fully addressed and has become an issue for us again that the software solution is now at the end of its economic life.
But you're getting an upgrade to it.
That's correct.
Or a replacement.
To address that issue still.
Okay. My question has to do with the aftermath of the flood, when homes were abandoned, and we gave people, a year plus to try to address some of those needs. And at the end of that year, there were still homes that nothing had been done to. And y'all went about the process of trying to catalog those, map them, and so on. How many of those homes still remain? Do you have?
I don't have the number, but we'll try to pull that together. There was something on the order of 113 that were still vacant and had not been repaired. This was a year ago. So the number would be much less than that today.
Okay, so would those...
A lot of those were actually buyout houses that we had tracked.
Well, not all of them were, because I've got some in Pennington Bend that weren't in the buyout. They weren't buyout eligible. They were in the flood plain, but not in the floodway. So would the ones that are remaining be on your demolition list that you talked about?
Not necessarily, but they might be there.
Okay, so when those...
We really soft pedaled. As far as the flood damaged houses that had not yet been repaired.
Right.
We tried to avoid ordering them to be demolished.
But if you got a home that's still vacant and it's sitting in the middle of a healthy neighborhood now, then there's an impact to that immediate community.
Correct.
So what are we doing to try to address that?
I'll find out the answer to that. If there's any specifically that you're concerned about, please let us know what they are. But I'll try to get you
you have the list of where all those places are, right?
Correct.
So anything in zip code 37214, you look at your list, and those are the ones I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Claiborne. Seeing no other council members in the queue, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Cobb and company, for your service to the city, and this concludes your budget hearing.